Friends, if you want to watch the super fun, adventurous, and absolutely entertaining movie Home Alone 3, 1997, in English, then you must like this video right now. And if you are visiting our channel for the very first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel because today's video is going to be full of entertainment and excitement. In today's video, we are going to talk about one of the most talked about and funniest family comedies from the Home Alone franchise, Home Alone 3. This movie is packed with laughter, action, clever tricks, and a completely new storyline that takes the fun to another level. We will explore what makes this film different from the first two Home Alone movies, who the new characters are, and how the movie delivers a fresh twist to the classic holiday mischief formula. Friends, we will discuss everything about Home Alone 3 in detail, including where you can watch it and on which OTT platform or satellite channel this movie is available. If you are planning to watch it for the first time or rewatch it for nostalgia, this video is going to give you complete information about the best ways to enjoy it in high quality. Along with that, we will cover everything related to the technical department, including cinematography, editing, music composition, and all the creative work that went into making this film. We will also talk about the music department and how the soundtrack complements the overall vibe of the movie. From pre-production planning and script development to filming locations, direction, and the entire post-production process, we are going to take you behind the scenes to see how this movie was made. We will also share interesting details about the budget of the film, its box office performance, and how audiences reacted when it was released. Was it as big of a hit as the first two movies? Did fans love the new cast, or did they miss the original faces? We'll answer all of these questions in today's video. And yes, we'll dive deep into the storyline as well. I'll give you a small review of the plot without revealing too many spoilers, but just enough to make you excited to watch it. Apart from the story, we will also talk about the star cast in detail. You will get to know about each actor's performance, which character they played, and how their roles shaped the film's fun and adventurous tone. We'll discuss Alex D. Linz's portrayal of the new little troublemaker, Alex Pruitt, and how he manages to outsmart a group of international spies using clever traps and hilarious tricks. We'll also talk about the supporting cast, their performances, and how they contributed to making this film memorable in its own way. Not only that, but we'll also share some behind-the-scenes facts and lesser-known trivia about the making of Home Alone 3. From funny incidents during filming to the challenges the team faced on set, there are lots of surprising and interesting things you probably don't know about this movie. So, friends, I highly recommend that you stick with us until the very end because this video is going to give you complete information and lots of fun details about Home Alone 3. So, without wasting any more time, let's begin today's video and dive into the world of clever traps, hilarious pranks, and endless laughter with Home Alone 3. Home Alone 3 takes its time setting up a story that feels bigger, bolder, and more adventurous than the first two films, yet it manages to keep the same mischievous charm that defines the franchise. The plot unfolds in a fun, straightforward, and highly engaging way, without any confusing time jumps or experimental storytelling tricks. Everything moves in a clean, linear structure, starting from a seemingly small, harmless mix-up that spirals into chaos. It all begins at San Francisco International Airport, where a team of highly skilled international criminals, Beaupre, Unger, Jernigan, and Alice, are smuggling a top-secret $10 million microchip designed for missile cloaking technology. To hide it, they cleverly stash the chip inside a remote-control toy car, assuming it will pass undetected through security. But then fate decides to meddle with their plans. An innocent, slightly forgetful woman named Mrs. Hess accidentally grabs the wrong bag at the baggage claim, unknowingly walking away with the toy car and the chip inside it. This tiny accident becomes the catalyst for the entire story, and from this moment onward, the game is set in motion. The criminals trace the bag to Mrs. Hess's suburban Chicago neighborhood, determined to retrieve their precious package at any cost. Meanwhile, we meet our protagonist, 8-year-old Alex Pruitt, a curious, inventive, and slightly lonely kid who's stuck at home recovering from chickenpox. While most kids would be bored lying in bed, Alex finds himself in the middle of an international spy chase without even realizing it at first. He notices strange activity around the neighborhood, unusual vans, suspicious strangers sneaking around, and odd noises in the night. Unlike most adults in the story, including his own family, Alex trusts his instincts. Using his telescope, toy gadgets, and sharp observation skills, he begins to piece together that something unusual is happening. The audience is invited into Alex's perspective here, and this is where the narrative builds tension while staying fun. We're solving the mystery alongside him, watching the puzzle come together little by little. The first big turning point arrives when Alex discovers the microchip hidden inside the toy car. Suddenly, the stakes escalate from a neighborhood mystery to an international crisis. The audience realizes the danger long before the adults in the story do, which makes the tension deliciously entertaining. While Alex tries to warn the local police, nobody takes him seriously. They assume it's just a bored, imaginative kid making up stories. This creates one of the movie's strongest recurring themes, the underestimated cleverness of children and how adults often fail to see the bigger picture. Left to his own devices, Alex decides that if nobody else is going to protect the house and potentially national security, he'll have to do it himself. From this point onward, the narrative shifts gears into full-throttle adventure. The criminals, frustrated by their failed attempts to locate the chip quietly, decide to infiltrate Alex's house directly. This is where Home Alone 3 diverges from the earlier films in tone and scale. While Harry and Marv from the first two movies were bumbling burglars, Beaupre's team are professional operatives with advanced gadgets, surveillance tools, and a very high-stakes objective. But the brilliance of the narrative lies in how it flips the power dynamic. For trained adults with expensive equipment versus one sick, chickenpox-covered kid armed only with everyday household items, a toy car, a pet rat, and a hilariously smart parrot named Doris. It's David versus Goliath, but with remote control chaos, slippery stairs, exploding paints, electrified gadgets, and wildly inventive booby traps designed with comedic precision. The climax, where Alex unleashes his full arsenal of homemade defenses, is an extended sequence of fast-paced, escalating set pieces. Every trap is not just a gag, but also a demonstration of Alex's creativity and problem-solving skills. From turning simple tools into clever weapons to coordinating distractions with his pet parrot, the way he improvises under pressure makes the sequence wildly entertaining. Each hit, fall, and mishap suffered by the criminals is more outrageous than the last, but there's an added layer of tension here compared to previous Home Alone movies because these villains are far more dangerous. You can feel the stakes rise with every encounter, and yet, through clever editing and comedic timing, the tone stays fun and family-friendly, keeping the audience laughing even while they're invested in Alex's safety. But the story doesn't just rely on slapstick. Beneath all the chaos, Home Alone 3 carries emotional weight, too. Alex isn't just defending his house, he's proving himself. He's underestimated by everyone, his parents, his siblings, the police, yet through his courage, resourcefulness, and persistence, he not only protects his family's home but also saves a piece of military technology that's vital to national security. It's a journey of personal triumph disguised as a comedic action romp. By the time the authorities finally arrive, Alex has already outsmarted the professionals and captured the entire gang, giving the resolution a deeply satisfying punch. Thematically, the film cleverly mixes family comedy with spy thriller energy. It celebrates resilience, intelligence, and the idea that sometimes kids see the world more clearly than adults do. Unlike the first two movies, which leaned heavily on holiday spirit and nostalgia, Home Alone 3 pushes into new territory by combining slapstick humor with an espionage-driven plot, making it feel like a hybrid between a family-friendly heist movie and an inventive backyard adventure. Every turning point, from the airport mishap to Alex's discovery of the chip, from the neighborhood surveillance sequences to the explosive, trap-filled finale, is crafted to build momentum, tension, and laughter simultaneously. By the end, the narrative has gone full circle. What started as a random mix-up at an airport escalates into a high-stakes battle of wits between a sick little kid and a team of professional criminals, blending comedy, action, and clever storytelling into one wild ride. The movie experiments less with nonlinear tricks and more with shifting tones, bouncing seamlessly between suspense, humor, and action. And that balance makes it one of the most uniquely structured entries in the franchise. The characters in Home Alone 3 are designed to give the movie both its heart and its energy, and the story wouldn't work without the way each one plays their part in shaping the tension, humor, and emotion. Unlike the first two films in the franchise, this one introduces an entirely new set of characters, giving the narrative a fresh identity while still holding onto the core theme. An underestimated kid outsmarts a group of adults who completely underestimate him. However, the film doesn't stop at just throwing Alex Pruitt into the spotlight. It layers his relationships, the motivations of the villains, and the dynamics within his home and neighborhood to create a lively ensemble that keeps the movie entertaining from start to finish. At the center is Alex Pruitt, an 8-year-old boy who's clever, creative, and endlessly resourceful, yet dismissed by almost everyone around him. He isn't just a generic replacement for Kevin McCallister from the first two movies. Alex has a different personality and a unique journey. His chickenpox sets up the situation where he's isolated from school and stuck at home, but instead of lying around and doing nothing, his curiosity kicks in. His arc throughout the film is one of self-reliance and personal growth. At the start, he's simply trying to pass the time, tinkering with gadgets and observing his neighborhood through a telescope, but as soon as he realizes there's something suspicious going on, he takes action. This transition from passive observer to active protector makes him one of the most engaging child protagonists in the series. By the time the villain storm is home, Alex has transformed into a mini-strategist, someone capable of thinking like an engineer under pressure. He uses his wits, his gadgets, and his imagination to create complex traps that balance comedy with genuine tactical brilliance. His development isn't about losing his childishness. It's about realizing his own capabilities and proving to everyone, especially himself, that he's far more capable than they think. Then there's Mrs. Hess, the slightly grumpy yet good-hearted elderly neighbor whose innocent mistake sets the entire chain of events in motion. By accidentally swapping bags at the airport and bringing home the remote-controlled car containing the stolen microchip, she unknowingly places Alex right in the middle of an international chase. Her relationship with Alex is charmingly understated. She's initially skeptical and dismissive of his warnings about suspicious activity in the neighborhood, but later becomes an ally when she realizes just how much trouble he's in. Mrs. Hess adds warmth, a touch of humor, and a subtle reminder that kindness, even in small gestures, can end up shaping entire destinies. Alex's family also plays a crucial role, even though they aren't as involved in the action as he is. His parents, while loving and caring, are preoccupied with work and household responsibilities, making them somewhat oblivious to the extraordinary danger right under their noses. His siblings, on the other hand, bring a dose of realism to the household dynamic. They tease him, argue, and roll their eyes at his warnings, capturing the classic sibling energy that many viewers can relate to. What's interesting is that Alex's independence doesn't come from rebelliousness, but from necessity. His family's unintentional absence forces him to step up when no one else believes him. This creates a deeper emotional layer. Alex isn't just fighting burglars for fun. He's fighting because he knows no one else is going to step in. That quiet loneliness, balanced with his cheerful resourcefulness, makes his victory later in the film feel satisfying and well-earned. The villains in Home Alone 3 are a completely different breed compared to Harry and Marv from the earlier films. This time, instead of bumbling small-time burglars, we get 4 highly skilled international criminals working for a North Korean terrorist organization. Their mission isn't simply to rob a house. They're after a $10 million microchip capable of cloaking missiles, hidden inside the remote control car that accidentally lands in Alex's possession. Leading the group is Petre Beaupre, the calm, calculated mastermind who always thinks he's the smartest person in the room. Beaupre's leadership is defined by precision and efficiency, but what makes him interesting is watching his composure slowly crack as Alex continues to outsmart him. He starts as confident and smug but ends up frustrated and desperate, a satisfying reversal that mirrors Alex's own growth. Alice Ribbons, the second in command, is equally clever and determined but adds a different energy to the team. She's cool, composed, and methodical at first, but like Beaupre, her patience unravels when the traps start hitting harder than expected. Burton Jernigan and Erlanger, the remaining two members, serve as the muscle of the team, but they also deliver a lot of the physical comedy. They stumble, fall, and take most of the punishment from Alex's inventions, balancing the film's darker espionage undertones with slapstick humor that appeals to all ages. What makes these villains work so well is the dynamic between them. While they are portrayed as dangerous professionals, their personalities clash under pressure, and as Alex's traps continue to destroy their carefully planned operation, we see cracks in their unity. That tension between their confidence and their constant humiliation keeps the tone fun and light even when the stakes are technically life and death. Unlike Harry and Marv, who were purely comedic, Beaupre's team feels threatening enough to make Alex's success meaningful, but not so dark that it removes the film's family-friendly charm. Supporting characters like the police officers and various neighbors add texture to the narrative. The authorities don't believe Alex when he repeatedly calls to report suspicious activity, which forces him to rely on his own resourcefulness. This lack of adult intervention is critical to the story's momentum. It puts Alex in complete control of the situation while subtly reinforcing the theme of children's intelligence being underestimated. Even Alex's pet parrot and pet rat contribute to the action in memorable ways. The parrot, Doris, is hilariously smart and plays a key role in Alex's strategies, whether it's distracting the criminals or delivering crucial objects at the right moment. These small, unexpected allies give Alex's defense system a unique twist and make his victories feel more playful and inventive. The most compelling aspect of the character development lies in how relationships shift over the course of the film. Alex goes from being seen as a sick, helpless kid to the neighborhood's unexpected hero. Mrs. Hess's dynamic with Alex evolves from casual annoyance to genuine trust and appreciation. Even the audience's perception of the villains changes. They start off as intimidating figures in control, but as the story progresses, their arrogance becomes their undoing, and we watch their frustration boil over in comedic chaos. By designing the characters around these evolving relationships and motivations, Home Alone 3 creates a more layered narrative than it first appears. Alex's ingenuity and bravery wouldn't shine without skeptical adults dismissing him. The criminals' repeated failures wouldn't be funny without their initial professionalism and confidence. Performances in Home Alone 3 are the glue that holds this lively, trap-filled adventure together. While the film changes direction from the original two movies, introducing an entirely new cast and moving away from Kevin McCallister's story, the actors here manage to breathe life into fresh characters, balancing humor, tension, and heart in a way that keeps the movie entertaining. Every performance, whether big or small, contributes to the film's energy, giving it personality and charm. At its core, the movie lives and dies by how believable the characters feel, and while the tone leans comedic, the cast sells both the laughs and the danger effectively. Let's start with Alex D. Linz, who carries the film on his small shoulders as Alex Pruitt, the 8-year-old genius at the center of the chaos. Casting a new lead after Macaulay Culkin's iconic performance in the first two films was no easy task, but Linz steps up with a natural, effortless charm. He avoids being overly precocious or exaggerated. Instead, his performance feels grounded and authentic, which is exactly what the film needs. He captures the innocence of a kid stuck at home with chickenpox while also making his cleverness and resourcefulness believable. Linz has an expressive face that sells every moment, whether he's nervously peeking out of a window, hiding under the bed, or gleefully watching his booby traps take down one villain after another. There's a playful spark in his delivery that keeps Alex relatable. He's not portrayed as an impossibly brilliant genius, but as a smart, determined kid using what's available to him. Linz also handles the physical comedy like a pro, showing excellent timing during the sequences where Alex rigs his gadgets, sets traps, or celebrates his little victories. Without his convincing portrayal, the entire film would have struggled to hold the audience's investment, and that's what makes his performance one of the strongest elements of the movie. The villains are where Home Alone 3 shifts away from pure slapstick and leans slightly into espionage-inspired energy, and the cast playing them brings very different but complementary energies to the screen. Olek Krupa, as Petra Beaupre, delivers a perfectly controlled, cold-blooded performance as the leader of the international criminal team. He's calm, calculating, and composed, giving his character an aura of genuine danger compared to the bumbling burglars from the earlier films. There's an interesting subtlety in how Krupa plays Beaupre. He starts off supremely confident, treating the mission like clockwork, but as Alex continues to outsmart him, you can see the cracks forming. His growing frustration is quiet at first, then slowly erupts into visible anger, making his downfall in the trap sequences far more satisfying. Alongside him is Rya Kihlstedt as Alice Ribbons, the second in command and arguably the most physically versatile performer among the villains. She brings sharpness and intensity to her role, exuding quiet authority at first, but slowly unraveling as the chaos builds. Kihlstedt's performance adds a refreshing contrast to the usual comedic bad guys in the franchise. Alice is competent and dangerous, which raises the stakes, but once she starts falling victim to Alex's booby traps, her reactions are priceless. The way she oscillates between icy professionalism and comedic exasperation gives her character an added layer of entertainment. Lenny von Dohlen as Burton Jernigan and David Thornton as Earl Unger round out the team, and their roles lean more heavily into the slapstick tradition that fans of the franchise know and love. They're the ones who take the brunt of Alex's most painful traps, slipping, crashing, getting hit, shocked, and bruised, and they embrace every bit of it with full commitment. Their exaggerated reactions, wild expressions, and over-the-top screams make them the perfect comedic counterweights to Beaupre and Alice's otherwise controlled menace. The chemistry among the four villains is one of the highlights of the movie. The tension between their professionalism and constant humiliation at the hands of a clever 8-year-old gives the film both laughs and suspense in equal measure. On the family side, Haviland Morris plays Karen Pruitt, Alex's caring but preoccupied mother, with warmth and believability. Her performance captures the constant push and pull of a busy parent balancing work and home life, creating a believable dynamic where Alex is left to fend for himself during critical moments. Kevin Kilner as Jack Pruitt, Alex's father, brings similar groundedness to the role, though he's away for much of the story. Their relationship with Alex is kept simple but heartfelt, adding emotional stakes without overshadowing the action and comedy. And then there's a fun surprise. A young Scarlett Johansson plays Molly Pruitt, Alex's older sister. Even though it's a small supporting role, Johansson demonstrates early signs of her natural screen presence. She nails the sibling dynamic perfectly, teasing Alex, dismissing his suspicions, and rolling her eyes in classic older sister fashion. While she doesn't have major emotional beats to play with, her performance adds authenticity to the family atmosphere and a fun layer of nostalgia for audiences revisiting the film today. One of the standout comedic performances comes from Marion Seldes as Mrs. Hess, the cranky but ultimately kind-hearted neighbor who unintentionally sets the entire plot in motion by swapping luggage at the airport. Seldes delivers her lines with dry wit, balancing grumpiness and warmth beautifully. Her chemistry with Alex D. Linz is subtle but effective. Their interactions add levity in the early part of the film and pay off emotionally later when Mrs. Hess realizes just how capable Alex really is. Even the smaller roles make an impact. The local police officers, though dismissive of Alex's warnings, inject a light sense of frustration into the narrative, further amplifying Alex's isolation and determination. And, of course, Alex's animal companions, his pet rat and his parrot Doris, might not be human performers, but they steal the spotlight in several scenes thanks to clever direction and perfectly timed comedic beats. Doris, in particular, often feels like an honorary sidekick, playing a crucial part in helping Alex outwit the criminals. What ties all these performances together is the tonal balance each actor maintains. The villains play their roles straight enough to make the danger believable, but lean just far enough into physical exaggeration to keep things funny and family-friendly. The family members ground the movie emotionally, keeping Alex's journey relatable. And Alex D. Linz himself ties everything together with a performance that's smart, playful, and heartfelt. Watching him shift between moments of vulnerability, bursts of courage, and little victories is where the movie finds its charm. The direction of Home Alone 3 is a careful balancing act, and it's clear that the director approaches the film with a very deliberate vision. He doesn't just create a movie about a kid defending his home. He builds a heightened, playful world where everyday objects become weapons, An ordinary suburban neighborhood becomes a battlefield, and an 8-year-old boy turns into a mini-strategist fighting off an elite team of international criminals. Unlike the first two films, which leaned heavily into Christmas spirit and nostalgia, the director here shifts the tone slightly into a more adventurous, almost spy thriller territory, while still keeping the comedic heart of the franchise alive. This tonal blend is tricky to pull off, but the director's choices in pacing, framing, performance calibration, and shot design ensure the story never loses its sense of fun even when the stakes feel bigger. One of the most striking stylistic choices is how much the director commits to showing the story from Alex's perspective. By keeping the camera frequently at the boy's eye level, the world around him feels a little larger, a little more intimidating, and a lot more adventurous. The audience sees the criminals the way Alex does. Larger than life, slightly exaggerated, and, at times, hilariously clumsy. These framing decisions deepen immersion, making viewers feel like co-conspirators in Alex's plans. When Alex sets up his traps, we're not just watching from above. We're down on the floor with him, peeking around corners, following wires, testing mechanisms, and anticipating that sweet moment of chaos when everything finally clicks into place. Pacing plays a huge role in shaping the film's mood. The director builds tension gradually, layering small discoveries and close calls until the big third-act payoff. Early on, we watch Alex grow suspicious of the new neighbors, slowly piecing together clues, and the pacing mirrors that detective-like vibe. But once the criminals make their move, the tempo accelerates, cuts get faster, music picks up, and the editing drives the energy higher and higher, keeping viewers hooked. Despite the breakneck action, though, the director always gives comedic beats room to breathe. When a villain gets slammed by a swinging bucket, stuck in the attic, or zapped by a rigged contraption, the camera lingers just long enough for the audience to savor the expression before cutting to the next punchline. It's this precise manipulation of rhythm, slowing down to let us laugh, then speeding up to keep adrenaline pumping, that keeps the movie consistently entertaining. Shot composition is another tool the director uses brilliantly. Wide shots dominate the action sequences, letting the geography of Alex's house and neighborhood remain crystal clear. You always know where each villain is, what trap they're about to trigger, and how the chaos unfolds step by step. This clarity is essential because so many of the gags rely on setup and payoff. If the audience doesn't understand how a trap works before it's sprung, the laugh falls flat. But here, everything is choreographed like a dance. A wire stretches across a hallway, a toy car zooms around a corner, a painting swings from the ceiling, and you always know exactly where it's headed and why it matters. The director treats Alex's home like a living character, full of secrets, tools, and opportunities, and by constantly giving us clean, readable compositions, he makes the house itself part of the fun. There's also a deliberate emphasis on practical effects and real physical comedy. The director could have leaned on cheap visual tricks, but instead, he ensures that most stunts feel tactile and grounded. The villains slip, tumble, scream, and smash into walls with weight you can feel, which not only makes the comedy sharper, but also keeps the stakes believable. You know these guys are dangerous. They're highly trained, well-equipped, and on a mission, but you also can't stop laughing when they repeatedly lose battles against homemade booby traps and a kid's clever engineering. By staging these stunts with authenticity, the director bridges the gap between slapstick humor and spy thriller tension, creating a unique tonal hybrid that defines Home Alone 3. Sound design and music choices enhance this vision further. The mischievous cues that follow Alex's creative plotting make us root for him even more, while the more intense, suspenseful themes underscore the seriousness of the criminal's mission. This dynamic musical interplay mirrors the film's narrative contrasts, innocence versus danger, laughter versus tension, and reinforces the director's control over the audience's emotional experience. He knows when to make you smile, when to make your heart race, and when to make you lean in, waiting for the inevitable chaos to unfold. Another clever directing decision lies in planting small details early and paying them off later. That remote-controlled toy car, Alex's telescope, the parrot's chatter, even background noises around the house. These elements seem trivial at first, but the director weaves them back into major beats later on, rewarding viewers who are paying attention. It gives the film a sense of cohesion and cleverness, turning Alex's environment into a dynamic toolkit rather than a static backdrop. Perhaps most importantly, the director never forgets that this is a family film, meaning tone is everything. The criminals are threatening enough to feel dangerous, but ridiculous enough to make them perfect comedic targets. Alex's traps inflict plenty of chaos, but never truly horrifying consequences. Camera angles avoid gruesomeness, relying instead on reaction shots, exaggerated performances, and perfectly timed cuts to sell the pain without alienating younger viewers. This balancing act keeps the movie accessible for its intended audience, while still satisfying adults who enjoy inventive physical comedy. Every choice, from perspective and pacing to composition and sound, reflects a director fully in control of the film's mood and rhythm. He transforms a simple suburban home into a high-stakes battlefield without ever losing sight of the fun at the story's core. By treating Alex's small world as something grand, strategic, and cinematic, the director crafts an experience that feels bigger than its setting, giving Home Alone 3 its own identity while honoring the chaotic spirit of the franchise. The cinematography in Home Alone 3 is one of those quietly clever elements that doesn't scream for attention but constantly shapes the way we experience every prank, chase, and emotional beat. What makes it so engaging is how it combines playful framing, clever lighting, and dynamic camera movement to create both suspense and comedy while keeping the audience completely aligned with Alex's perspective. Unlike its predecessors, this film leans even harder into visual storytelling, using the camera as an extension of Alex's resourceful little mind. From the moment we step into the Pruitt household, we're given a child's eye view of the world. The camera often sits low to the ground, matching Alex's eye level, which makes everything, doors, hallways, staircases, even his backyard, feel bigger and more adventurous than they would to an adult. This subtle shift in perspective instantly places us in Alex's shoes, so when danger creeps in, we feel the same mix of fear, curiosity, and excitement he does. The wide framing of the house's interiors is one of the film's most effective visual tools. Whenever Alex sets up his elaborate traps, the cinematography deliberately pulls back, giving us clean, full views of the hallways, staircases, and rooms where the chaos unfolds. These wide shots are not just for style. They're designed to help the audience understand the trap geography exactly the way Alex does. You can literally trace the route of the villains, see the exact placement of marbles, buckets, wires, and toys, and anticipate every satisfying payoff. The film thrives on that spatial awareness, letting viewers feel like tactical insiders rather than passive observers. On the flip side, when the emotional beats kick in, the camera moves in closer. Tight close-ups on Alex's expressions, his brows furrowing as he figures out the microchip mystery, his mischievous grin when a trap lands perfectly, or his wide-eyed panic when things momentarily spiral out of control, keep us deeply connected to his inner world. Likewise, reaction shots of the villains, with exaggerated facial expressions framed dead center, become an essential part of the comedic rhythm. These moments work because the cinematography understands that physical comedy lands best when you let faces do half the work. Depth of field is used strategically throughout the film to balance suspense and clarity. During quiet, investigative moments, like when Alex examines the toy car or spies on the intruders through his telescope, a shallow focus isolates small but crucial details, forcing us to concentrate exactly where he's looking. Conversely, when the chaos explodes, deep focus keeps everything sharp in the frame, the villain slipping on ice in the foreground, a swinging paint can in midair, and Alex darting into the background, all visible at once, creating a beautifully orchestrated mess where nothing feels lost. The camera movement mirrors this balance between control and chaos. Tracking shots follow the remote-controlled toy car like it's a mini protagonist of its own, almost anthropomorphizing the little gadget as it zips under furniture and between chair legs, adding a sense of tension and kinetic fun. Smooth dolly moves glide behind Alex as he prowls around the house, emphasizing his calculated, confident energy when preparing traps, while sudden handheld shakes are reserved for frantic villain moments, giving their perspective a slight edge of instability. These shifts in motion subtly reinforce who holds the upper hand in any given scene. Lighting plays an equally essential role in shaping the film's tone. The Pruitt household is bathed in warm, natural lighting during calm domestic scenes, soft lamps, kitchen fluorescents, sunlight spilling across wooden floors, creating an atmosphere of safety and comfort that Alex is determined to defend. But as soon as the danger approaches, the palette begins to shift. The intruders are often lit in cooler, slightly harsher tones, particularly during their nighttime stakeouts and break-ins, establishing a clear visual contrast between home and threat. Shadows crawl longer in scenes where suspense builds, using staircases, doorways, and corners to suggest lurking danger without overplaying it for younger audiences. There's an especially clever use of silhouette work during the nighttime sequences, villains framed against moonlit windows, long shadows stretching across walls, and narrow shafts of hallway light cutting into darkness, all of which layer tension under the film's playful surface. Framing decisions elevate ordinary suburban spaces into dynamic playgrounds. Hallways become runways for chaos, with leading lines pulling the audience's eye straight to the next disaster waiting to happen. Doorways act like mini-theaters, capturing villains mid-gasp or mid-stumble as they fall victim to Alex's creativity. Staircases are repeatedly shot from high and low angles, exaggerating their steepness, so every tumble or slide feels bigger and funnier than life. Even furniture, tables, chairs, lamps, doubles as framing tools during trap sequences, giving us a peek through gaps and rails while teasing what's about to hit the villains next. Color also works quietly, but effectively. For most of the movie, the tones stay grounded in natural, suburban realism, but the production sprinkles in pops of vivid color, bright red switches, glowing buttons, spilled paint, shiny metal toys, to highlight the chaos Alex orchestrates. These small splashes make the comedic beats visually sharper, helping the audience track key objects without needing dialogue to explain anything. Then there are the standout visual moments, the little sequences where the cinematography goes above and beyond. The slow reveal of the stolen microchip hidden inside the toy car is shot like a miniature thriller, with deliberate close-ups, slight rack focuses, and tight angles on Alex's fascinated expressions. The attic trap sequence is another example, where layered framing uses vertical space creatively. Low-angle shots make the villains look momentarily powerful, only for the next shot to flip perspective entirely as gravity, and Alex's traps humble them in seconds. And, of course, the grand final trap montage ties everything together visually. Fast intercuts of Alex's gadgets, wide house shots mapping the battleground, and insert close-ups on key trigger points create a sense of controlled chaos that feels incredibly satisfying. What makes the cinematography of Home Alone 3 so fun is that it stays in constant dialogue with the story and tone. It doesn't just capture the action, it participates in it. It invites us into Alex's tactical mind, lets us savor the anticipation of each trap, and emphasizes comedy without undercutting suspense. Every camera choice, every angle, and every shift in lighting reinforces the balance between playful mischief and genuine danger, making the entire experience visually engaging from start to finish. Editing and pacing in Home Alone 3 aren't just technical choices, they're the heartbeat of the entire movie. Without the right rhythm, Alex's wild pranks wouldn't land, the tension wouldn't build, and the laughter wouldn't explode at exactly the right moments. This film depends on a very delicate balance between setting up its story, delivering sharp comedic payoffs, and keeping the audience emotionally hooked from start to finish. The editors clearly understood that Home Alone 3 is as much about timing as it is about creativity, and that shows in almost every single frame. The first act sets a slower, more deliberate rhythm. Unlike the first two movies, where Kevin's separation from his family kicks off the chaos early, Home Alone 3 takes its time introducing us to Alex, the suburban setting, and the group of criminals chasing after the stolen microchip. These early scenes are edited with longer takes, smoother transitions, and gentle cross-dissolves to give viewers room to absorb the new story and meet the fresh cast. For example, when Alex is introduced, the camera lingers on his daily life, feeding his pet rat, chatting with his parrot, sneaking peeks at the neighbors, and these quieter cuts establish his clever but innocent personality. The pacing here matters because it gives us time to connect with him emotionally before the chaos begins. But once the stolen microchip becomes the focus, and the four international criminals begin their surveillance of the neighborhood, the editing subtly shifts gears. There's a smart use of parallel editing where we cut back and forth between Alex discovering strange patterns outside his house and the villains carefully planning their break-in. This creates dramatic irony. The audience knows what's coming, but the adults in Alex's life remain oblivious. These intercut sequences keep tension bubbling beneath the surface, pulling us deeper into the story while preparing us for the inevitable showdown. Then comes the big shift in pacing, the point where Alex realizes nobody believes him and decides to handle things his own way. The second act speeds up slightly, with shorter, sharper cuts, and we start getting more insert shots and close-ups. Whether it's Alex sketching out trap plans, wiring devices, or setting up marbles and pulleys, the editing focuses on details that build anticipation. The quick close-ups of switches clicking, screws tightening, and wires connecting act almost like a visual countdown, a promise to the audience that something big and hilarious is coming. These moments are cut against wider establishing shots that show us the layout of the house, making sure we understand where every trap is positioned. This clarity is critical because when the action explodes later, we know exactly where everyone is and what's about to hit them. When the third act begins, the editing takes complete control of the film's energy. The sequence where the four criminals finally invade the house is a masterclass in comedic pacing. The cutting becomes much faster and far more playful, switching between the villain's smug expressions, Alex's anticipation, and the traps themselves being triggered one by one. The rhythm tightens, each gag is given just enough room to breathe before cutting to the next, and this controlled acceleration creates a rising wave of chaos. The editor carefully avoids stacking too many gags back-to-back without reaction shots. Instead, we get little pauses to watch the criminals' faces contort in pain or shock before being hit with another disaster. This back-and-forth rhythm amplifies the comedy while preventing it from becoming overwhelming. One of the smartest choices in the third act is the layering of suspense with slapstick. The editor doesn't just cut randomly between traps. The sequence is structured like a domino effect. One villain sets off one trap, which triggers a response from Alex, which causes another villain to blunder into their own misfortune. The cuts keep circling between setups and payoffs, maintaining a constant sense of forward motion while making the whole showdown feel choreographed rather than chaotic. This gives the comedy a sense of precision and makes the film incredibly rewatchable. You notice little timing details and background actions that you missed the first time. Even within the chaos, the editor knows when to slow the pace to create tension. For instance, during the rooftop chase and attic standoff moments, the cuts deliberately stretch out, holding on longer takes to make us wonder what Alex or the crooks will do next. These moments of stillness make the following gags hit even harder because the audience is tricked into thinking the danger has passed, only for a bucket to fall or a floor to collapse seconds later. The sound editing plays a huge role in enhancing the pacing as well. Notice how many scenes use overlapping sound bridges to transition between moments. A squeaky door slam carries us into the next shot, or a parrot's loud squawk cuts directly into a villain screaming in another room. These audio cues smooth the flow while also reinforcing comedic beats, making the transitions feel seamless instead of jarring. Emotionally, the editing also works to keep Alex's perspective central. Between the wild antics and noisy slapstick, we still get moments where the camera lingers on his expressions, his determination, frustration, and little flashes of pride when his plans succeed. These longer pauses amidst the chaos remind us that this isn't just random physical comedy. It's a story about a clever kid outsmarting a team of trained adults. Unlike some movies where fast editing can feel exhausting or aimless, Home Alone 3 understands the importance of breathing room. The shifts between quiet build-up, escalating tension, and explosive humor are perfectly balanced, making the movie engaging for both kids and adults. The deliberate pacing ensures that every trap lands, every joke registers, and every victory feels earned. The soundtrack and score of Home Alone 3, 1997, are not just an accessory to the film's humor and action. They are an essential driving force behind its identity, energy, and emotional rhythm. Composed by Nick Glennie Smith, The music seamlessly blends playful orchestration with moments of suspense, effectively turning the score into an invisible narrator that guides the audience's emotional journey. Where some family comedies rely on silence or minimal scoring, Home Alone 3 leans fully into a bold, dynamic soundscape that enhances every shift in tone, from lighthearted mischief to high-stakes tension. It feels almost as if the music is another character in the film, constantly reacting to what Alex, the villains, and the gadgets are doing on screen. The score uses a carefully structured set of motifs and musical signatures that allow the audience to subconsciously track character dynamics and narrative developments without even realizing it. Alex has his own recurring theme, a bright, playful, and inventive melody often carried by woodwinds, light piano, and tinkling bells, perfectly capturing his resourcefulness and childlike curiosity. Whenever Alex begins planning his clever traps or hatches a new idea, this whimsical motif sneaks in softly and then builds momentum, reflecting his growing confidence and creativity. In contrast, the villain's theme is much darker and more calculated, built around lower brass tones, muted percussion, and ominous synth layers. The music immediately signals danger whenever they're on screen, establishing their presence before they even act, a clever auditory cue that adds suspense while still maintaining the comedic undertone. One of the most impressive aspects of the soundtrack is how seamlessly it integrates rhythm, silence, and sound effects into its composition. Unlike traditional family comedies that separate music from on-screen action, Home Alone 3 constantly syncs the score with diegetic sounds, a garage door creak, a marble rolling, a switch clicking, or a trap snapping shut. These sounds are blended with the music so naturally that the entire sequence feels choreographed, especially during the big trap montage, where each movement has a matching musical beat. The film treats these sequences almost like a miniature ballet of chaos. Every trap Alex sets, every pratfall the criminals endure, every squeaky floorboard has its own musical punch, perfectly timed for comedic impact. Silence also plays a surprisingly powerful role in shaping tension and timing. Before the biggest gags or shocking reveals, the score often pulls back entirely, leaving the soundscape bare except for creaks, whispers, or distant footsteps. This creates an anticipatory space where the audience instinctively leans in, and then, just when the tension peaks, the score crashes back in with percussive stings and frantic rhythms that amplify the hilarity of the moment. These carefully calculated drops and surges are part of what makes the film's comedic beats so effective. In larger set pieces, such as the elaborate home defense sequences, the score builds layer upon layer of instrumentation to create a sense of escalating chaos. Fast-moving strings, sharp brass hits, and syncopated percussion combine to create a high-energy pulse that mirrors the increasing stakes on screen. Yet the music never loses its playful edge. The orchestrations remain light, elastic, and full of bounce, reminding us that while the action may feel intense, the tone is still comedic and family-friendly. Another noteworthy detail is how the soundtrack balances its action-driven cues with warm, tender musical moments. While most audiences remember the comedic traps, the film also has quieter scenes that emphasize Alex's relationship with his family and his desire to protect his home. In these sequences, the music softens into gentle piano melodies and delicate string harmonies, grounding the film emotionally and creating contrast that makes the chaos of the trap sequences feel even more explosive when the energy returns. What makes Home Alone 3's soundtrack stand out from other entries in the franchise is its techno-spy influence, reflecting the film's plot involving stolen microchips and international criminals. Subtle electronic textures and pulsing bass lines are introduced alongside the traditional orchestral palette, giving the score a modernized edge that aligns with the high-tech gadgets and surveillance-heavy storyline. These touches expand the sound world of the Home Alone universe without losing the whimsical charm that defines the series. The pacing of the score mirrors the pacing of the film, brisk, punchy, and constantly shifting between tension and release. Quick, playful flourishes dominate the comedic beats, while sharp crescendos and dramatic stabs elevate moments of suspense. Even though the narrative is straightforward, the score adds layers of excitement and texture, making the film feel faster, funnier, and more energetic than it would without the music's support. Every sonic detail is meticulously placed, from the quirky woodwind runs that mirror Alex's fast thinking to the pounding percussion that tracks the villain's growing frustration, resulting in a musical experience that perfectly amplifies the narrative beats. Ultimately, the soundtrack functions as the heartbeat of Home Alone 3, an unspoken storyteller shaping emotion, pacing, and comedic precision. It highlights Alex's ingenuity, intensifies the villain's failures, and breathes life into the film's biggest set pieces, creating a rhythm that keeps audiences invested from start to finish. Without the score's playful energy, the traps would land flatter, the tension would feel weaker, and the emotional stakes would seem smaller. Instead, the music transforms each sequence into a carefully orchestrated spectacle of timing and tone, balancing suspense, humor, and heart in a way that makes the entire experience far more immersive and fun. Home Alone 3 goes far beyond being just a slapstick comedy filled with creative traps and hilarious pranks. Beneath its lighthearted surface, the movie quietly weaves together several deeper themes and social commentaries that make it far richer than it first appears. At its core, the film celebrates the idea of childhood empowerment, a recurring theme in the franchise but handled here with its own twist. Alex Pruitt, an 8-year-old dealing with chickenpox, is not just a mischievous kid defending his house. He becomes a symbol of cleverness and resilience, proving that age and authority are not prerequisites for capability. While the adults around him, his parents, neighbors, and even the police, dismiss his warnings and underestimate his intelligence, Alex channels his frustration into problem-solving, transforming his vulnerability into strength. This taps into one of the film's most compelling messages. When institutions fail to protect you, resourcefulness and creativity become tools of survival, and sometimes, it's the smallest voices that hold the sharpest solutions. The movie also explores the theme of the domestic space as both sanctuary and battleground. Alex's house is not just a cozy suburban home. It becomes the symbolic heart of the story, a space worth protecting from invasive outside forces. But unlike the earlier Home Alone films, Home Alone 3 elevates the stakes by tying Alex's personal defense into a larger geopolitical conflict. A stolen microchip containing cutting-edge missile cloaking technology, hidden inside Alex's remote control car, turns an ordinary neighborhood into the center of an international spy mission. This collision between the global and the local highlights an anxiety that was growing in the late 1990s, the idea that suburban safety could be unexpectedly compromised by forces far beyond one's control. The film cleverly plays with this tension, embedding complex global threats inside everyday objects, like toys, suggesting that modern dangers can infiltrate even the most seemingly peaceful and secure environments. In addition to themes of empowerment and security, the movie offers a layered critique of adult perception and authority. One of the recurring frustrations in the film is that Alex is constantly dismissed and ignored by the adults around him. His mother is busy balancing work and parenting, his father is away on business, his siblings tease him, and the local police brush off his calls for help. This creates a narrative where authority figures, whether familial, institutional, or societal, are depicted as distracted, skeptical, or outright incompetent. While the movie frames this dynamic humorously, it carries an underlying commentary about how adults often fail to truly listen to children or recognize their capabilities. By positioning Alex as the only one who takes the threat seriously, the film underscores the idea that heroism sometimes emerges from those least expected, challenging traditional notions of who has the right to act in moments of crisis. Another fascinating layer of the film lies in its depiction of technology and globalization. The microchip isn't just a random plot device. It symbolizes the merging of consumerism, play, and power. By hiding the chip inside a toy car, an object meant for innocent fun, the film subtly hints at how the tools of modern life can be repurposed in unexpected, sometimes dangerous ways. It's a reflection of late 20th century anxieties about technological advancement, international espionage, and the growing awareness that invisible, high-stakes conflicts were playing out far beyond the public's eye. Yet, despite this complexity, the movie doesn't lose its playful tone. Instead, it transforms a child's ordinary gadgets and playthings into heroic tools of defense, framing ingenuity as the ultimate weapon against global chaos. The film also raises quiet moral questions that lurk beneath the comedy. Alex's booby traps are brilliantly inventive and undeniably hilarious, but when you pause to consider the real consequences, electrocutions, explosions, heavy objects falling on heads, the humor carries a faint trace of ethical tension. Are these traps simply harmless slapstick, or are they acts of calculated violence from an 8-year-old? The movie carefully walks a fine line, framing the action in cartoonish exaggeration to keep the tone light, yet it subtly invites viewers to consider proportionality, self-defense, and responsibility. Unlike the earlier Home Alone films, where the burglars were local crooks, here the antagonists are elite international operatives, which makes Alex's victories both more satisfying and more ethically complex. He's not just outsmarting bumbling thieves, he's defeating highly trained adults in genuinely dangerous scenarios. Community and solidarity also emerge as meaningful themes, even if subtly woven into the background. While much of the film celebrates Alex's independence, it also suggests that even the cleverest individual needs support systems, whether it's Mrs. Hess, his cranky but ultimately helpful neighbor, or the involvement of local authorities once they finally take him seriously. The conclusion of the film, where adults and institutions eventually rally around Alex, underscores a powerful idea. Heroism may begin individually, but collective action ultimately secures safety. In this way, the movie balances individual empowerment with the importance of community awareness, reminding viewers that even in moments of crisis, we are rarely truly alone. Stylistically, the themes are reinforced through visual and narrative choices. By framing many shots from Alex's height and perspective, the movie aligns us directly with a child's point of view, allowing us to experience both his ingenuity and his frustration. Close-ups of toys, gadgets, and small details emphasize how ordinary household objects gain new meaning through creativity, while quick cuts between Alex's quiet preparation and the chaotic failures of the criminals highlight the David versus Goliath dynamic that drives the story. Even the recurring toy motifs work symbolically, underscoring how imagination transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary, a constant reminder that innovation often begins where playfulness and necessity meet. In the end, Home Alone 3 carries a surprisingly thoughtful set of messages beneath its comedic surface, that intelligence and imagination can triumph over force, that safety and danger are sometimes closer than we think, and that underestimated voices, especially those of children, can shift the balance of power when the adults fail to see the bigger picture. It blends slapstick fun with subtle explorations of responsibility, authority, technology, and resilience, leaving audiences entertained while nudging them to reflect on themes much larger than a simple battle between a boy and 4 thieves. That layered balance between comedy and commentary is part of what makes the film linger. It's not just about laughing at falling burglars, but about recognizing the extraordinary potential hidden in seemingly ordinary people, places, and moments. Visual effects and CGI in Home Alone 3 aren't just background tools. They're part of the film's comedic heartbeat, quietly driving the story forward while letting the physical gags take center stage. Unlike modern family films that rely heavily on computer-generated mayhem, this movie thrives on a hands-on approach, with practical effects forming the foundation of nearly every laugh, every trap, and every disastrous accident. The filmmakers clearly understood that for slapstick humor to land, audiences need to feel the weight, impact, and timing of each mishap, and that's something only real-world mechanics, clever prop design, and precise stunt coordination can truly deliver. From the moment Alex Pruitt begins setting up his elaborate defenses, the visuals lean on a delicate blend of camera tricks, tactile effects, and subtle CGI enhancements to create chaos that feels grounded in reality, but still just exaggerated enough to be hilarious. Take the traps, for example. Every swinging bucket, icy step, and triggered explosion is meticulously designed using real objects and controlled rigs, ensuring that the reactions from the unlucky villains feel authentic. You can sense the velocity when a paint can arcs through the air, hear the splinter of wood when a doorframe shudders, and even spot the slight wobble of props as they collide, tiny imperfections that make the comedy more believable. Practical rigs were built for sliding floors, spring-loaded triggers, breakaway furniture, and automated toy cars, giving the action a physicality that wouldn't have been achievable with 1997-era CGI. What's remarkable is how much care goes into staging these effects safely while still making them look chaotic. Hidden harnesses, drop mats, and crash pads are used strategically so stunt performers can throw themselves into walls, tumble down stairs, or get pelted with objects without risking serious harm, and any visible rigs are later erased with digital cleanup, so the illusion remains seamless. The remote control car, a centerpiece of the film's spy-themed storyline, is another example of clever effects integration. Instead of relying on animated CGI, the team uses practical photography. Close-up inserts, detailed prop builds, and dynamic tracking shots make the toy feel fast, responsive, and critical to the plot. The addition of a stolen microchip hidden inside elevates its importance, and smart visual framing treats it like a high-tech gadget rather than a simple toy. Digital compositing subtly enhances these sequences by smoothing out transitions, erasing off-screen handlers, and adjusting timing so that the car always feels in control. Yet the core effect relies on real, tangible motion, which grounds the tension and comedy. Animal work also deserves special mention, particularly the parrot and the rat, which provide some of the movie's funniest beats. Rather than relying on digital replacements, the filmmakers used trained animals whose movements were edited to create the illusion of deliberate acting. Quick reaction shots, clever intercuts, and tight framing combine to make it seem as if the parrot's sass and the rat's antics are perfectly timed responses to the villain's misfortune. These effects shine precisely because they feel unmanufactured. Audiences subconsciously register the authenticity of real feathers, fur, and motion, which digital effects of the time couldn't replicate convincingly. Where CGI does come into play, it's used sparingly and intelligently, focusing on enhancements rather than spectacle. Wires from safety rigs are digitally erased, minor continuity issues are corrected, and background plates are occasionally composited to extend the geography of a shot or hide crew equipment. Explosions and paint splatters sometimes receive slight digital augmentation to make them more visually satisfying, but these touches are subtle enough that they never distract from the moment. In a few rare cases, you can catch the limitations of late 90s compositing, a faint matte line here, a slightly mismatched grain pattern there, but these instances are fleeting, tucked inside quick edits designed to keep viewers focused on the humor rather than the technique. The choice to rely on practical effects over heavy digital work also serves the pacing of the comedy. Physical gags have a rhythm, setup, tension, release, and that rhythm depends on real physics. When a villain steps on ice, you believe the weight shift. When they topple backward into a pile of objects, the debris scatters in unpredictable, chaotic ways that CGI often struggles to replicate convincingly. This unpredictability is key to the humor. It keeps every mishap fresh and reactive, making the audience feel like they're witnessing accidents unfold in real time rather than watching pre-programmed animations. The editing team leans into this by using fast, rhythmic cuts that amplify the chaos while preserving spatial clarity. You always know where each character is in relation to the trap, which makes the payoff more satisfying because you understand exactly why the disaster happens. Lighting and cinematography also play a crucial role in selling the effects. Rather than spotlighting CGI enhancements, the lighting is designed to highlight texture, shadow, and movement in the real-world props and sets. Shiny paint splashes catch natural light, broken objects scatter realistically, and smoke or dust from triggered traps lingers in the air just enough to make the environment feel alive. These atmospheric details subtly enhance immersion. The aftermath of each gag looks messy, tactile, and believable, because it actually is. Makeup effects and physical prosthetics provide the final layer of visual comedy. Villains walk away from each trap with soot-smudged faces, fake bruises, exaggerated red marks, and perfectly timed costume tears, all deliberately oversized but grounded in the family-friendly tone of the movie. Instead of aiming for realism and injuries, the makeup amplifies the cartoon logic of the narrative. Characters endure endless punishment without lasting harm, and the audience laughs at the absurd resilience built into the film's physical world. Ultimately, Home Alone 3's visual effects succeed because they understand their role. They support the storytelling, enhance immersion, and elevate the comedy without overshadowing it. The balance between practical ingenuity and restrained CGI is what makes the film's traps, stunts, and gags feel immediate and memorable even decades later. Where many modern comedies lean on digital trickery that can sometimes feel weightless, this film embraces the tangible, real props, real stunts, real reactions, and lets subtle VFX serve as invisible glue that smooths the edges. The result is a movie where the laughter stems from seeing chaos happen, not from being shown an overly manufactured simulation of it, and that choice gives the film a timeless visual identity. The set design and locations in Home Alone 3 play an enormous role in shaping the movie's personality, humor, and immersive atmosphere. Unlike its predecessors, which kept much of the chaos confined to the McCallister house, this film takes a slightly broader approach, while still centering the story around a single suburban environment, the Pruitt family home. Every detail of the production design is carefully crafted to make the world feel believable, lived in, and perfectly suited for both the story's spy thriller undertones and its playful, over-the-top comedy. From the snowy streets of Chicago suburbs to the meticulously decorated interiors, every space has been designed to reflect the tone of the film and enhance its visual storytelling, making the audience feel like they've stepped right into Alex Pruitt's everyday world, only to watch it spiral into total chaos. The Pruitt home itself is practically a character in the movie. Its architecture and layout are intentionally designed to serve the traps, gags, and chase sequences that define the Home Alone formula, but the production team also makes sure it feels like a real family home rather than an overly polished set. The house is warm and welcoming, filled with soft pastel tones, scattered toys, cozy furniture, and personalized decorations that give you a sense of the Pruitt family's dynamics without a single line of dialogue. The set decorators ensure that Alex's personality shines through in his bedroom, which is packed with gadgets, toys, and bits of technology that hint at his inventive nature. It's not just a background, it's storytelling through design. His tools for crafting traps are subtly placed within the environment: toy cars, cables, walkie-talkies, and random household objects, making it believable that he's using things already available to him rather than magically conjuring up elaborate contraptions. The layout of the home is also designed with precision to make the action sequences fluid and visually coherent. Every hallway, staircase, and room is staged in a way that allows smooth transitions during chase scenes while keeping the geography of the house easy for viewers to understand. When Alex lures the villains into different areas, you can instantly track their locations relative to one another, which heightens the suspense and humor. The production designers clearly planned for the choreography of chaos, making sure each trap had enough space to breathe and that the camera could capture it from multiple angles without feeling cluttered or confusing. Whether it's the front entryway rigged with booby traps, the backyard prepared for icy mishaps, or the attic filled with carefully staged props, each location within the house is optimized to support the comedic pacing and visual flow. Outside the home, the suburban neighborhood adds another layer of believability and contrast. The snow-covered streets and cozy houses create the perfect backdrop for the movie's winter setting, grounding the story in a familiar, relatable environment while providing opportunities for tension. Wide establishing shots give a sense of the neighborhood's layout, showing how Alex uses his surroundings to his advantage, particularly when the villains begin navigating the area. The cinematography captures these exteriors beautifully, blending crisp white snow with warm holiday tones inside the homes, giving the film a seasonal charm even though it leans more into spy action than overt Christmas themes. The inclusion of multiple locations beyond the Pruitt household subtly expands the film's scope without losing intimacy. There's the local police station, Alex's school, and small glimpses of other community areas, all designed with realistic details to make the setting feel alive. However, the movie never strays too far from its central playground, the house, ensuring the core tension between Alex and the thieves remains concentrated. These supplemental sets are functional rather than flashy, offering just enough variety to keep the pacing fresh while never distracting from the main storyline. Props also play a critical role in tying the set design to the film's narrative. Every gadget, household item, and quirky object used in Alex's traps feels grounded in reality because it belongs to the environment. A seemingly harmless snow shovel becomes a defensive tool, Toy vehicles turn into tactical weapons, and simple household appliances become the foundation for elaborate booby traps. This clever integration of everyday objects makes the comedy more engaging because audiences recognize the items and instinctively imagine themselves in the same situation. It also speaks to the production team's creativity. The environment is used to its fullest potential without relying on artificial or out-of-place additions. Lighting complements the production design by enhancing mood and spatial awareness within each location. The interiors are lit warmly, making the house feel safe and comforting at first, but as the villains invade, shadowed corners, dimmed hallways, and practical lighting fixtures shift the tone into one of playful suspense. Outside, natural light bounces off the snowy landscapes, adding brightness and visual clarity that make action sequences easy to follow. The clever balance of light and shadow across different settings supports the movie's dual identity as both a family comedy and a light spy thriller, giving each location a distinct personality that matches the scene's emotional beats. Another subtle achievement of the production design is its ability to balance realism with exaggerated visual storytelling. While the Pruitt home and neighborhood look believable, they're intentionally constructed to maximize comedic opportunity. The high ceilings give room for swinging traps, the wide staircases allow villains to tumble dramatically, and the backyard slopes are perfect for slippery antics. It's realism designed for chaos, and it works. Unlike films that feel over-stylized, the set feels authentic enough for audiences to invest emotionally while also functioning like a playground for action-driven comedy. Even the color palette plays into the overall design philosophy. The warm reds, greens, and soft neutral tones inside the home contrast beautifully with the icy whites and grays outside, subtly reinforcing themes of comfort, family, and intrusion. This intentional visual balance makes the movie more engaging on a subconscious level. The audience associates the inside of the home with safety, yet it's constantly being invaded, creating tension without the film having to over-explain it. In essence, the set design and locations in Home Alone 3 are meticulously crafted to work in harmony with the narrative, comedy, and action. Every corner of the Pruitt house, every snowy street, every little prop on a shelf exists with purpose, either to tell us more about the characters, set up a gag, or enhance the film's visual energy. The production team doesn't just build environments, they construct playgrounds of mischief, tension, and laughter, letting the settings quietly become partners in the storytelling. The dialogue and script in Home Alone 3 take a different tonal approach compared to its predecessors, carving out their own identity while still carrying the DNA of the franchise's sharp humor, chaotic energy, and inventive one-liners. Written with a mix of witty banter, clever setups, and situational comedy, the script carefully balances Alex Pruitt's quirky personality with the ridiculous antics of the international spies chasing him. Unlike the earlier films where Kevin McCallister's lines were playful yet mischievous, Alex's dialogue leans more toward curiosity, intelligence, and subtle sarcasm, giving the movie a distinct voice while keeping its comedic charm intact. One of the strengths of the script is its ability to capture Alex's inventive and resourceful nature without making him sound unnaturally precocious. His lines feel natural for an 8-year-old while still showing that he's clever enough to outsmart a team of highly trained criminals. Instead of trying too hard to make him sound like an adult, the writers give Alex speech patterns and phrasing that feel authentic for his age, quick, observant, and occasionally adorably blunt. When he talks to his mom or older siblings, his frustration comes through in a believable way, often landing comedic punches that reveal his wit. His curiosity drives much of the narrative, and his dialogue reflects his evolving confidence as he realizes he's the only one capable of defending his home. The villain's dialogue provides a totally different layer of entertainment. Unlike Harry and Marv from the first two films, who were cartoonishly goofy, the spies in Home Alone 3, Beaupre, Jernigan, Unger, and Alice come across as calculated professionals, yet the script cleverly undermines their seriousness by throwing them into increasingly absurd situations. Their dialogue is peppered with sharp exchanges and quick bursts of frustration, which not only establish their personalities, but also allow the audience to enjoy watching their composure unravel. The script gives each member of the team distinct traits expressed through their speech patterns. Beaupre has a commanding, measured tone. Jernigan leans sarcastic. Unger gets flustered quickly, and Alice blends confidence with exasperation. These differences make their interactions dynamic and help set up comedic tension, particularly as Alex's traps start dismantling their carefully laid plans. Where the script shines most is in its timing. The punchlines are often set up several beats earlier and delivered casually, letting the humor land without forcing it. Simple exchanges like Alex calmly explaining his reasoning or the villains bickering among themselves while unknowingly walking into chaos make the dialogue feel effortless rather than overscripted. It's this understated comedy that makes the movie's lines memorable, even when they aren't trying too hard to be iconic. The script also has fun layering in spy thriller elements without abandoning the heart of a family comedy. Conversations involving the stolen microchip and international criminals have a slightly more sophisticated edge than typical Home Alone banter, but they're balanced with playful moments to avoid breaking the film's lighthearted tone. The writers sprinkled technical-sounding lines about surveillance, encrypted data, and tactical maneuvers into the villains' dialogue, giving them credibility as professionals while contrasting them with Alex's inventive but homemade counter-strategies. This tonal duality, spy movie seriousness clashing with childhood mischief, creates a rhythm that keeps the audience engaged and laughing at unexpected beats. Another strength lies in the emotional undertones of the dialogue, particularly in moments involving Alex's family. While the movie focuses heavily on slapstick and comedic tension, the script occasionally slows down to allow brief but meaningful interactions between Alex and his mom. These scenes give Alex's character more depth, grounding him emotionally and reminding the audience why he fights so fiercely to protect his home. His conversations with Mrs. Hess, the quirky elderly neighbor, are another standout element. The dialogue between them is charming and funny, blending Alex's youthful impatience with Mrs. Hess's dry humor and forgetfulness, creating a relationship that adds warmth to the story. What also makes the dialogue memorable is its seamless integration with visual comedy. The script leaves room for silence and reaction-based humor rather than overloading every moment with exposition or constant chatter. For example, during key trap sequences, Alex barely says a word. Instead, the comedy unfolds visually while earlier dialogue has already set up the stakes. This restraint in writing shows confidence in the audience's ability to follow the story and makes the jokes hit harder when a perfectly timed line does break the silence. One of the most entertaining aspects of the script is how it gives the audience a sense of satisfaction when Alex verbally outsmarts the spies. His retorts aren't exaggeratedly heroic, but delivered with the casual confidence of a kid who knows he has the upper hand. These moments become mini payoffs, turning otherwise tense sequences into comedic victories. The spy's growing frustration, often expressed through hilarious bickering, contrasts beautifully with Alex's calmness, creating a sharp comedic rhythm throughout the second half of the film. While Home Alone 3 doesn't rely on as many instantly quotable one-liners as the original movies, it thrives on its subtlety and balance. The dialogue prioritizes character building and situational humor rather than forcing iconic catchphrases, which makes the writing feel more natural and less performative. This approach allows the audience to stay invested in the story and characters while still delivering plenty of memorable exchanges sprinkled across the movie. Home Alone 3 takes the beloved blueprint of the franchise and gives it a subtle twist, leaning into genre conventions while sprinkling in fresh ideas that make it stand apart from its predecessors. At its core, it still functions as a family comedy, packed with slapstick chaos, clever pranks, and the satisfaction of watching a resourceful kid outsmart clueless adults. However, unlike the first two films, which were purely about one boy versus a pair of burglars, this installment integrates elements of a spy thriller, giving the story a slightly bigger scale while keeping the comedic heart intact. This blend of genres makes the movie both familiar and refreshingly different, striking a balance between classic Home Alone nostalgia and a more action-driven narrative. The film embraces several traditional genre conventions: the mischievous kid defending his home, the bumbling criminals falling into elaborately crafted traps, and the growing tension as the protagonist gains confidence. But it doesn't just recycle the formula beat for beat. Instead, the story raises the stakes by introducing an international espionage subplot involving a stolen microchip. Suddenly, the conflict isn't just about protecting presents or household valuables. Alex is unknowingly standing between high-level criminals and a top-secret piece of technology. This narrative twist injects a layer of suspense that wasn't as prominent in the earlier films, giving the audience a taste of spy movie tension without ever losing the playful tone the franchise is known for. The humor, however, remains the backbone of the movie, and it thrives on its ability to blend slapstick with clever setups. Fans of the franchise expect outrageous physical comedy, and Home Alone 3 delivers, but with new inventive scenarios tailored to its slightly updated setting. The booby traps this time feel more advanced, reflecting Alex's unique resourcefulness and creativity, while also giving the villains increasingly ridiculous ways to embarrass themselves. The editing, timing, and visual gags lean heavily on classic comedic beats, allowing for moments of escalating chaos that satisfy longtime fans without feeling too repetitive. Where the movie diverges from cliches is in its handling of the villains. In the first two Home Alone films, Harry and Marv were larger-than-life caricatures, bumbling crooks whose incompetence provided much of the comedy. In contrast, Home Alone 3 introduces a team of four highly skilled, seemingly capable international spies, Beaupre, Alice, Jernigan, and Unger, whose mission feels genuinely dangerous at first. They're professional, coordinated, and confident until they encounter Alex. Watching these trained operatives slowly descend into the same cartoonish chaos as Harry and Marv is part of the film's clever subversion. The genre sets them up as serious antagonists, but the story deliberately dismantles their authority through Alex's traps, flipping the power dynamic in unexpected and hilarious ways. The suspense elements are another refreshing aspect of the film's genre execution. While the first two movies relied almost entirely on tension rooted in whether Kevin would get caught, Home Alone 3 introduces broader stakes. There are moments where the audience senses genuine danger. The idea of international criminals chasing after sensitive technology naturally raises the intensity. Yet the film never lets itself become too dark or heavy. Instead, it balances the threat with well-timed comedic beats that keep the mood light and family-friendly. The shift in tone from low-stakes mischief to high-stakes espionage works surprisingly well because the pacing never allows the tension to overshadow the humor. At the same time, the film plays with expectations in how Alex is portrayed within the genre. Unlike Kevin, who relies heavily on sheer luck and instinct, Alex's success feels more calculated. His traps are crafted using technology, strategy, and observation rather than pure improvisation, making his victories over the villains feel clever rather than coincidental. This shift subtly modernizes the franchise, reflecting the late 90s fascination with gadgets and a more tech-driven approach to problem-solving. For younger audiences of the time, this would have felt fresh, tapping into a growing interest in innovation while still keeping the playful, over-the-top charm of a family holiday movie. Another strength of the film's genre execution lies in its tone management. The comedy lands where it should. The action sequences inject energy without overpowering the story, and the quieter moments between Alex and his family provide just enough warmth to balance out the chaos. These emotional beats prevent the film from feeling one-dimensional, grounding the story so that it resonates beyond just the slapstick humor. Whether it's Alex bonding with Mrs. Hess, the cranky neighbor who unexpectedly becomes a key part of the plot, or his frustrations with his dismissive family, these smaller moments give the story texture, allowing the audience to connect with Alex as more than just a mischievous prankster. Perhaps the boldest choice the film makes in terms of genre is its expanded world-building. By weaving in the espionage plot, the movie briefly dips into action thriller territory without alienating the family audience. From high-tech surveillance gear to tense sequences where the spies coordinate their search, these moments introduce a different flavor of excitement than the franchise had previously offered. Yet, just when it feels like the tension might escalate too far, the film pulls back with comedic relief, like a perfectly timed pratfall or a sarcastic one-liner that undercuts the seriousness. It's this push and pull between genres that gives Home Alone 3 its distinct identity. The result is a movie that dances confidently between family comedy, action-adventure, and light suspense without losing its sense of fun. It honors the expectations set by its predecessors while subtly reinventing the formula for a slightly different audience and era. The familiar beats, elaborate traps, escalating chaos, and satisfying payoffs are still there, but layered with fresher ideas that give the film its own voice within the franchise. Home Alone 3 isn't shouting social critique from the rooftops, but it sneaks a surprising amount of cultural commentary into its slapstick sandbox, like a prank that also makes you think for a second while you're laughing. At the most obvious level, the film toys with late 1990s anxieties about technology and globalization. Hiding a missile-cloaking microchip inside a child's remote control car turns an everyday consumer object into a symbol of how high-tech threats can ride into domestic life on a tide of mass-market goods, which says something about the era's uneasy sense that advanced tools weren't just in the hands of nations, but could be embedded in the toys and devices of ordinary people. That plot device lets the movie gesture toward a larger anxiety, invisible danger in visible places. Without ever becoming a paranoid treatise, it uses the image of a disguised threat to dramatize how porous the boundary between the private home and global politics can be. Running alongside that is a persistent, almost affectionate critique of adult competence. Parents, neighbors, and officials are well-meaning but distracted or slow to act, which frames childhood ingenuity not merely as cute cleverness, but as a practical corrective when institutions fumble. That dynamic taps into a broader cultural script, kids as underestimated engines of agency, and the film keeps returning to it. So every gag also doubles as a vignette about whose voice gets heard and whose expertise gets respected. The suburban setting itself is a cultural statement. The tidy house and snow-dusted streets are depicted as sanctuaries that can nevertheless be invaded by remote, geopolitical forces, and that collision between cozy domesticity and international skullduggery riffs on a period when popular culture was starting to reckon with how connected and vulnerable everyday life had become. The film is also quietly conversational about gender and role reversal. The villain team includes a competent female operative whose professional demeanor complicates the usual women as victims/sidekicks trope, and the contrast between her efficiency and the henchman's comic pratfalls play with expectations in interesting ways. It's a small but telling subversion of who gets agency and action beats. On representation and sensitivity, there are more awkward notes. Leaning on international criminals as the faceless threat flirts with generic foreignness that the script doesn't interrogate deeply, so viewers attuned to stereotyping can feel the story, simplifying geopolitical complexity into cartoonish antagonists. The movie largely prefers spectacle to nuanced cultural critique, which keeps the politics light but sometimes makes the source of danger feel flattened into another. Ethically, the film raises an eyebrow too. The elaborate booby traps invite laughter but also pose questions about proportionality and violence inflicted by a child. The movie deliberately frames harm as cartoonish to diffuse moral unease, and that stylistic choice works for family comedy yet leaves a faint trace of unease if you pause to consider consequences. Community and intergenerational ties get a warmer treatment. The cranky neighbor who becomes a helpful ally, and the small domestic kindnesses that ripple into plot are gentle endorsements of neighborliness, implying that social cohesion and ordinary kindness are valuable defenses against larger threats. There are also faint reflections of changing family dynamics, busy parents, the absent father on business, siblings who roll their eyes, which mirror late 90s conversations about parental availability, children's independence, and how households negotiate safety and responsibility. Stylistically, the movie prefers to embody its commentary through action and production design rather than through didactic dialogue. Toys, household objects, and camera perspective, where often at the child's eye level, do most of the thematic work, so the film's social notes feel embedded in its look and gags rather than tacked on. Ultimately, the commentary lands best when it stays modest and sly. The movie is most effective when it lets the audience infer the meaning beneath the comedy, and while it doesn't fully interrogate the harder issues it touches, technology's dangers, cultural stereotyping, ethics of improvised violence, it packages them in a way that makes viewers chuckle first and think a little afterwards, which suits a film that wants to be entertaining above all but is smarter for including those resonant cultural threads. Home Alone 3 approaches audience engagement differently than its predecessors, leaning less on nostalgia-driven warmth and more on a clever mix of slapstick energy, tension-building suspense, and playful surprises that keep viewers leaning forward even when they think they know the formula. It's not trying to tug at heartstrings in the same deeply sentimental way the original Home Alone did, but it still knows how to create emotional beats that resonate, especially for its intended younger audience. There's a strong sense of identification with Alex, the new pint-sized protagonist, and the film smartly frames the story from his perspective, from the camera angles to the pacing of the gags, so viewers feel like they're scheming right alongside him. Kids especially get hooked on this empowerment fantasy. A boy sick at home, underestimated by adults, ends up outsmarting a team of international criminals using nothing but wit, creativity, and everyday household tools. It taps into a universal childhood daydream, the idea that grown-ups don't always get it right, and sometimes you have to take matters into your own hands, which creates an immediate connection and sense of ownership over Alex's victories. For families watching together, the humor bridges generational gaps with surprising ease. Younger viewers revel in the elaborate traps, outrageous pratfalls, and cartoonish chaos. Every perfectly timed slip, splash, and explosion is designed to trigger laughter, especially when the villains keep coming back for more punishment. Meanwhile, parents and older audiences find entertainment in the absurdity of the situations and the exaggerated incompetence of the criminals, but there's also a layer of sly self-awareness in the writing that makes revisiting the movie unexpectedly rewarding. While Home Alone 3 doesn't lean heavily on emotional tearjerkers, there are still small, heartfelt moments tucked between the chaos. Alex's bond with his mom, his determination to protect his home, and even his desire to prove himself when no one believes him add warmth and grounding to a film that otherwise thrives on spectacle. The pacing plays a huge role in keeping audiences engaged. The setup carefully balances tension with comedy. There's just enough build-up around the microchip, the villains, and Alex's isolation to create anticipation before the wild payoff begins. Once the booby traps kick in, the movie switches into full-blown high-energy mode, with escalating stakes and tightly choreographed sequences that feel like mini-action set pieces disguised as comedy routines. This shift keeps audiences invested because there's constant forward motion. Every trap feels like a creative reveal. Every villain reaction adds to the fun, and the sheer absurdity of the escalating damage keeps you curious about what Alex will come up with next. For kids, this leads to instant rewatch value. Part of the enjoyment comes from anticipating the exact moment a villain gets drenched, zapped, or slammed, and noticing new tiny details hidden in the chaos each time. Interestingly, Home Alone 3 also draws viewers into subtle conversations about independence, trust, and responsibility, even if it never foregrounds these themes directly. There's an unspoken invitation for children watching to see themselves as resourceful problem solvers, while adults are prompted, sometimes uncomfortably, to reflect on what happens when kids are dismissed or underestimated. These dynamics give audiences something to talk about afterward, especially in family settings where parents and children view the events from different emotional angles. While it's not heavy-handed or philosophically demanding, there's enough material beneath the surface to spark playful debates. Was Alex reckless or heroic? Should the adults have listened sooner? Did the villains get what they deserved? These questions linger longer than expected for a movie positioned as simple slapstick. Most importantly, the film earns engagement by creating an emotional rhythm rather than a flat line of constant gags. The quiet moments, like Alex piecing together his plans or worrying about protecting his family, give viewers a chance to breathe, reset, and reinvest before the comedic madness resumes. By spacing out its emotional beats, it allows the highs to feel higher and the victories more satisfying. For kids, it's an adrenaline rush paired with a sense of triumph. For adults, it's an unexpectedly charming reminder of childhood agency and ingenuity. And while the movie doesn't aim for deep existential reflection, its blend of clever setups, playful reversals, and relentless pacing makes it the kind of film audiences return to not just for the laughs, but for the pure, uncomplicated fun of watching a small hero outthink impossible odds. When comparing Home Alone 3 to its predecessors and other films within the family comedy genre, it becomes clear that this entry carves out its own identity while still leaning on the core formula that made the franchise iconic. Unlike the first two Home Alone films, which centered on Kevin McCallister and relied heavily on nostalgia, sentimentality, and Christmas-time magic, Home Alone 3 steps away from the familiar formula and introduces a fresh protagonist, Alex Pruitt, along with a completely new set of villains and stakes. While some purists saw this as a risky shift, the film uses its freedom to lean into bigger, bolder setups and a faster-paced narrative, giving audiences a slightly different flavor of mischief and chaos. Where the first films focus more on personal family drama and holiday spirit, this one dives into a more action-driven storyline, introducing an espionage twist involving a stolen microchip and a team of international criminals. It's still classic Home Alone at its core, a clever kid defending his home with ingenious traps, but the added layers of spy thriller tension make it stand out against the earlier entries rather than directly competing with them. In the broader context of family comedies of the late 90s, Home Alone 3 sets itself apart by blending slapstick antics with high-stakes plotting. While films like Dennis the Menace, Richie Rich, and Problem Child embraced chaotic comedy with mischievous kids causing trouble, Home Alone 3 adds structure and purpose to the madness. Alex's booby traps aren't just random gags, they're a tactical response to a very real threat, making the audience root for him not just because he's funny, but because the stakes feel earned. Compared to Richie Rich, which leaned on luxury-based humor, or Beethoven, which focused on family bonding through chaos, Home Alone 3 thrives on the thrill of strategy and clever problem-solving. This gives the film a different energy. It's less about accidental trouble and more about deliberate brilliance, showing Alex as an inventive, resourceful hero rather than just a mischievous kid stumbling into comedic situations. When stacked against the director Raja Gosnell's other work, the film's style also feels distinct. Gosnell, who later directed family-oriented hits like Scooby-Doo and Big Mama's House, often blends exaggerated physical comedy with high-energy pacing and a colorful tone. Home Alone 3 carries the earliest signs of his signature approach, with fast-moving sequences, layered visual gags, and a keen awareness of timing that keeps kids laughing while keeping adults entertained. However, unlike his later films, Home Alone 3 maintains a tighter balance between humor and tension, keeping its stakes grounded enough to make the payoff satisfying. You can see hints of his future style developing here, the mix of cartoonish chaos with moments of genuine suspense, but this movie uses those techniques in a more restrained way, resulting in something that feels uniquely crafted for the Home Alone franchise while still standing on its own. Against the larger backdrop of spy comedy hybrids, Home Alone 3 is surprisingly ahead of its time. While movies like Spy Kids and Agent Cody Banks would later lean into kid versus criminal narratives with high-tech gadgets and global stakes, this film experiments with that formula years earlier, embedding espionage elements into a suburban setting. By combining the cozy familiarity of a quiet neighborhood with the looming danger of international operatives, it crafts a setting where everyday objects, from toy cars to paint buckets, become Alex's secret arsenal. Unlike the more gadget-heavy films that followed, Home Alone 3 relies less on flashy technology and more on creativity, which gives it a timeless charm and makes it feel grounded despite its larger-than-life premise. Within the Home Alone franchise itself, the comparisons are inevitable. While the first two movies thrive on heartwarming Christmas nostalgia and rely on Kevin McCallister's charm, Home Alone 3 pivots toward a more universal tone, untethered from the holiday theme. This shift makes it less sentimental but arguably more versatile, opening the door to different kinds of comedic setups and allowing the traps to escalate in new, unexpected ways. It's also notable that the villains here differ from Harry and Marv's bumbling, personality-driven chaos. These criminals are more calculated, tech-savvy, and mission-focused, which raises the stakes and changes the rhythm of the humor. Instead of watching clumsy crooks fail endlessly, we get skilled professionals gradually dismantled by Alex's brilliant setups, which adds a layer of satisfaction as each carefully planned trap takes them down. What sets Home Alone 3 apart from countless other kid-centric comedies of its era is its balance between independence and relatability. While similar films often portrayed kids as exaggerated caricatures or comedic props, Alex feels believable and grounded, his resourcefulness earned rather than handed to him. The film gives audiences, especially younger viewers, the sense that they're in on the plan, engaging them in each decision, setup, and payoff. Compared to other entries in the franchise and its competitors in the genre, Home Alone 3 feels like it dares to take risks by shifting the formula while still delivering on the core promise: hilarious chaos, inventive traps, and a clever underdog triumphing over seemingly impossible odds. Home Alone 3 wears its metaphors like a kid wears gadgets, piled on, obvious if you look, but clever in the way they repurpose ordinary things into narrative meaning. The most immediate and recurring symbol is the toy itself, the remote control car that hides the microchip. On the surface, it's a convenient plot device, but as a symbol it connects play and power, innocence and danger. Turning a child's plaything into a vector for advanced weaponry shrinks the world. The global and the quotidian collide, and the movie repeatedly uses that collision to comment on how modern threats arrive disguised inside everyday objects. The toy becomes a visual shorthand for the film's twin anxieties: that technology can be weaponized, and that the lines between consumer goods and geopolitical instruments are blurrier than we like to think. Related to the toy is the motif of scale: small versus large, micro versus macro. Alex is physically small but strategically large. The chip is tiny but world-altering. The cinematography and blocking reinforce that metaphor by often framing big problems from a child's vantage point so that large threats look manageable through cleverness. This inversion, the small upsetting the large, functions as a sustained visual metaphor for empowerment and subversion. The more the film insists on observing scale, close-ups on tiny switches, wide shots of full hallways, the more it teaches that scale is less about size and more about agency. The house itself is another rich symbol. At first glance, it's a cozy domestic sanctuary, full of familiar props and soft lighting, the archetypal safe space. But the set design repeatedly turns the house into a battlefield, remapping its thresholds, staircases, and corridors into trap-laden zones. Doorways and thresholds operate as symbolic liminal spaces. Crossing a threshold in this film is equivalent to entering danger, or conversely, to stepping into responsibility. The attic and basement function like narrative strata. Attics tend to house secrets, and their cramped verticality highlights vulnerability and revelation. Staircases become moral and physical gradients where characters rise or fall. Treating the family home as both refuge and contested territory literalizes the movie's theme that the private sphere is not immune from wider conflicts. Traps operate on two metaphorical levels. Practically, they're comic set pieces, but metaphorically, they're arguments about consequence, creativity, and justice. Each trap is designed with attention to proportionality and ingenuity. They're not just punishments, they're statements. The film repeatedly frames Alex's booby traps as reparative. The world chooses to restore balance through cleverness rather than institutional force. That framing raises ethical questions, of course, and the movie's cartoonish tone attempts to neutralize those tensions. Still, the traps stand as metaphors for taking responsibility when formal systems fail, and for the idea that ingenuity can be a moral tool as well as a tactical one. Observation and surveillance are threaded through the film as motifs: telescopes, peeks through windows, the camera following the toy car, and they carry symbolic weight. Alex's telescope is more than a kid's gadget. It's a lens of awareness. The film privileges looking. Those who pay attention, Alex, see truth, while those who don't, distracted adults, remain blind to danger. Conversely, the villain's surveillance gear represents expertise without moral clarity. That juxtaposition creates a simple thesis: moral sight matters more than technological sight. Point of view framing thus becomes a metaphor for epistemic authority: who knows, who is believed, and why. Animals and odd companions, the parrot, the rat, play a surprising symbolic role. They are marginal allies that speak to overlooked resources. The parrot's voice becomes a literal amplification of truth and misdirection. The rat's presence points to humility and smallness as assets. Using creatures that adults would dismiss reinforces the film's recurring message that help comes from unexpected quarters and that social value is not limited to conventional power. Small allies function as metaphors for social networks, the kinds of informal, grassroots supports that institutions often ignore. Color, texture, and recurring objects also deliver metaphorical beats. The warm palette inside the Pruitt home versus the cooler, clinical tones during the villain's stakeouts mirrors inside/outside moral economies. Repeated close-ups of switches, red buttons, and wires carry an almost ritual quality. These are the levers of action, visually encoded as choices. The film's sound motifs, clicking remotes, the parrot squawk, the clatter of marbles act like leitmotifs that mark the collision of play and peril. Repetition of these sensory cues turns physical items into symbols by rote. The audience learns to read a click as a forthcoming moral or comic consequence. Disguise and identity are modest, but persistent metaphors. The villains adopt the masks of neighbors, and that choice dramatizes how evil sometimes hides behind familiarity. By contrast, Alex's disguise is creativity. He doesn't blend in. He weaponizes normalcy. The film plays with the idea that true identity in crisis is revealed not by what you wear, but by what you do. So the contrast between the criminal's false intimacy and Alex's authentic cunning becomes a metaphor for authenticity versus pretense. Finally, the film's structural repetitions, setup/payoff cycles, motif callbacks, and the escalation of traps operate metaphorically as a pedagogy of learning. Each iteration is a miniature lesson in cause and consequence, in planning and adapting. The narrative trains the viewer to appreciate reasoning as an aesthetic pleasure. Thinking clearly is as satisfying as physical victory. Through these repeated patterns, the film makes a subtle argument that play can be educational and that creativity applied under pressure is a form of moral education. Home Alone 3 sits inside the franchise like a mischievous cousin who borrows the family blueprint and tinkers with the internals. It keeps the DNA, a small, clever child, a defended house, Rube Goldberg-style comeuppances, but deliberately changes the players, the stakes, and the flavor, and that shift says a lot about what the series could become. Rather than trying to replicate the exact magic of Kevin McCallister, the film introduces Alex Pruitt and a new creative team, which immediately signals a willingness to experiment. The tone moves away from pure holiday nostalgia and toward a hybrid of family comedy and light espionage, swapping burglars for international operatives and Christmas morning stakes for a tiny high-tech MacGuffin hidden inside a toy. That change matters historically for the franchise because it proves the franchise formula is portable, that the joy of watching a child outthink grown-ups doesn't depend solely on the original cast or a Christmas setting. In 1997, this felt timely. The film nods to late 90s concerns about technology, surveillance, and globalization by making a toy the plot's pivot, so the domestic mischief now plays against the idea that consumer objects can mask wider, almost geopolitical dangers. Creatively, the switch of directors and cast reshaped the style. Where the first films leaned on sentimental beats and a cozy holiday palette, this installment emphasizes mechanical ingenuity, tactical setups, and a slightly more kinetic pace, which in turn influenced how later franchise offshoots and family action films thought about kids as clever, gadget-ready protagonists rather than just precocious troublemakers. Franchise-wise, it opened two practical doors. 1. It demonstrated that Home Alone could be a franchise in concept rather than in character continuity, enabling later made-for-TV sequels and reboots to reinvent leads and premises without feeling like betrayals. And 2, it made room for genre blending. You can see echoes of that kid versus high-tech opponent idea in later youth-oriented spy/adventure movies that lean on both heart and gizmos. The film's legacy is a mixed but instructive one. It didn't eclipse the original's cultural hold, nor did it become the definitive new face of the series, but it expanded the franchise's creative vocabulary and proved producers could refresh the premise rather than simply retread it. On a cultural level, it captures a moment when suburban safety was being reimagined. The house as sanctuary theme remains, but so does the new worry that global threats can hitch a ride on familiar objects, and the movie packages that unease in slapstick rather than polemic, which makes the idea accessible to families while still giving the story a slightly edgier undertone than earlier entries. The practical features first production values, an emphasis on tactile traps, real stunts, and puppet-like gadgetry, also root the film in a transitional era before digital effects dominated family comedies, and that choice helps the movie feel immediate and handmade in a way that serves the franchise's core pleasures. Finally, in franchise context, Home Alone 3 functions as proof of concept, a test that the formula's emotional hook, underdog ingenuity, domestic defense, comic comeuppance can be reframed across different tones, settings, and antagonists, which is why subsequent sequels and reboots feel less like desperate clones and more like variations on a reliably entertaining theme. Home Alone 3 was produced on a mid-range studio budget, about $32 million, and its theatrical performance sits in the modest, not mega-hit category. It opened December 12, 1997 with an opening weekend of roughly $5.09 million and finished its US/Canada run at about $30.9 million. While its reported international takings bring the commonly cited worldwide total to roughly $79.1 million. Box Office Mojo. 1. That math means the film earned roughly 2.47 times its production budget worldwide, is almost equal to $79.08 M divided by $32.0 M is almost equal to 2.47. So on paper it recouped production costs and then some, but that headline number masks the real business picture. Marketing and distribution. P/and A. Costs aren't included in the $32 M, and studios typically need a substantially larger multiple of the production budget to call a release a clear blockbuster. Box Office Mojo. 1. Domestically, the movie underperformed compared with the franchise's first two films. The original Home Alone and Home Alone 2 made vastly bigger returns. So in franchise terms, this entry was a step down in box office stature even if it eventually turned a modest global haul. Box Office Mojo. 2. The opening weekend share, about $5.09 M being /17% of the domestic total, and the film's multiplier suggests it had reasonable legs for a family comedy of the era, but it faced stiff December competition and mixed critical reaction that limited its upside. Critics were lukewarm. Rotten Tomatoes sits in the low to mid 30% range, even as audiences gave it a friendlier grade on opening night polling, CinemaScore around B+, a split that often produces decent home video. Life, but a restrained theatrical run. Rotten Tomatoes. 3. Wikipedia. 4. In short, Home Alone 3 paid its way and avoided being a catastrophic flop, but it was far from the franchise's financial high-water marks, a respectable, middle-of-the-road commercial result shaped by modest box office returns at home, a stronger international footprint that pushed the worldwide total up, and marketing/audience dynamics that kept it from becoming a breakout hit. The numbers. 5. Box Office Mojo. 6. 1. https://www. boxofficemojo.com/title/TT011930/?UTM_source =ChatGPT.com Home Alone 3 1997 Box Office Mojo. 2. https://www. boxofficemojo.com/franchise/FR25883380933/?UTM_source =ChatGPT.com franchise Home Alone Box Office Mojo. 3. https://www. RottenTomatoes.com/m/home_alone_3?UTM_source =ChatGPT.com Home Alone 3 Rotten Tomatoes. 4. https://e and wikipedia.org/wiki/home_alone_3?UTM_source =ChatGPT.com Home Alone 3. 5. https://www. the-numbers.com/movie/home-alone-3?UTM_source =ChatGPT.com Home Alone 3 1997 Box Office and Financial Information. 6. https://www.boxofficemojo.com/month/December/grosses option equals total grosses andref equals bow_md_or tandrely scale equals ydan sort equals r tan sort dir equals as. Domestic box office for December 1997. If you're wondering where to watch Home Alone 3, here's a breakdown of the best and most fun ways to experience it, whether you're cozying up on the couch or planning a nostalgic family movie night. Stream on Disney+. Home Alone 3 is currently available on Disney+, which is your best bet for seamless, legal streaming. If you're already subscribed, it's ready to go. If not, Disney Plus often offers bundle deals that give you access to a broader library of family movies. Rent or buy digitally. Prefer flexibility? You can rent or buy Home Alone 3 on most major platforms. Asterisk Amazon Video. Asterisk Apple TV/iTunes. Asterisk Google Play Movies. Asterisk Fandango at Home, Vudu. Prices typically hover around $3.99 for a rental and $4.99, $14.99 to buy, depending on the platform and quality. Not available on Netflix? Possibly region restricted asterisk. While Home Alone 3 appears in Netflix listings in some areas, it's not guaranteed. Availability varies by country. So, if you don't spot it in your Netflix library, that may be why. Hashtag best viewing experience tips. 1. If you have Disney Plus, watch it directly there for easy access and bonus family comedy selections. 2. If not streaming, rent or buy HD on Amazon, Apple, Google Play, or Vudu for crisp visuals and that cozy cinematic feel. 3. Planning a nostalgic marathon? Disney Plus lets you revisit the original Home Alone films too, making it a great platform for a themed movie night. Hashtag why platform choice matters. Streaming, Disney Plus, gives you zero wait time. Ideal for jumping into the fun. Digital purchases let you own the film, which means you can rewatch anytime. Extra convenient if you anticipate repeat viewings. Quality counts. Digital HD downloads often look better than streaming if your internet speed is a concern. In short, the easiest and most rewarding way to revisit Alex's trap-filled battle is via Disney Plus, or grab a digital copy if you'd like to keep it in your personal library.